Welcome, and thank you for joining our Innovision webinar featuring Contec Inc. Innovision has recognized innovation in South Carolina for over 20 years through our annual awards program and forums that spotlight innovative companies like Contec, who has won several Innovision Awards over that time. During these summer months, Innovision is focusing its forum series on companies that have pivoted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. For this forum, I will introduce you to the members of the Contec leadership team and ask a few questions to start the conversation. You will then have a chance to ask your questions directly or through the chat dialog box, which you can do at any time during the webinar. So let's get started. Contec, a leading manufacturer of contamination control products for mission-critical cleaning and manufacturing and healthcare environments worldwide. Contec serves industries with critical cleaning needs, including microelectronics, automotive, life science laboratories, pharmaceutical compounding, and acute care. They sell wipes, swabs, mops, and various designs and types, along with the cleaning chemicals that go with them. They also provide their customer with invaluable training. Established in 1988, they are headquartered in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So we're joined today by Contec founder and CEO, Jack McBride, and his leadership team to talk about how they have responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, making quick decisions in the face of so much uncertainty. So Jack, let's start with you. When did Contec first start to feel the effects of this pandemic?
Well, thank you, Michael. Interestingly enough, Avi Lawrence and I were in China celebrating a great year over there from January 7th to January 13th. And we celebrated and got on an airplane on the 14th. So we were almost involved with COVID in China before even getting to the United States. The plant in China closed after New Year's holiday and was closed for 2 weeks before they were allowed to open. Fast forward to the beginning of March, and we had an international sales meeting from March 2nd to March 7th. And we had all of our folks in from all over the world, except for Asia at that point, because by that time, the pandemic was well underway there. So on March 8th, I took off for a vacation in Barbados with my wife and some family members and pretty much unplugged from the real world. And during that time, things started happening in the US and I really didn't take any real interest in it. So I'm going to turn it over to Avi and Elaine to talk about how we started to respond to the pandemic when it first started to affect the US.
We started hearing a lot of news coming out about the pandemic. Cases were starting to increase significantly, and there were lockdowns starting to take place in many states and in many countries. And we as a management team here got together, and as soon as the state of South Carolina put out the lockdown announcement, we went into the exact same mode, because our biggest priority was ensuring that our employees, our team, were maintaining their safety and their health. And so we put in emergency guidelines, enacted an emergency guideline plan on March 17th. And essentially, we knew we had to maintain our manufacturing operations on a worldwide basis throughout this time, because we support basically the healthcare system as well as the pharmaceutical system within the United States on a worldwide basis, and needed to ensure that they were continuing to get products so that they could operate during this time. And so we put in a set of guidelines that ensured all our manufacturing folks, as well as everybody that supported manufacturing, were able to continue operating. Anybody that was not directly supporting manufacturing, for their safety, we asked them to begin working from home, and we put that in place immediately on March 17th. And then there are some other things that we did that we'll talk about, and that Raphael will talk about as we go through here. But Elaine, I'll turn it over to you if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
Thanks, Avi. Yes, one of the first things we needed to do, and we knew, was just get out in front of our employees and share with them what we knew. I mean, obviously this was unfolding at a time there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions being asked, what ifs. So we felt like we needed to educate them, first of all, on what we knew at the time about the COVID-19 virus, but also the questions that we knew would be on their mind, like, well, what if I can't work? What should I do? Am I going to get paid? So we made some decisions very early on to take a close look at our policies and procedures, and we revised those and developed them so that it would encourage employees not to come to work if they knew, in fact, that they were sick or had been exposed to a person who was. And we developed a hybrid pay policy, which would, in fact, Contec would offer to pay for them for the first part of their quarantine. And then if it continued on, they would share in that by using available PTO. And as Avi mentioned, I think doing that and letting employees know and encouraging them not to come to work, but to report if they were sick, I will say that did help overall. We've had very few cases of COVID in the workplace. And in fact, the few that we've had have not been to workplace contact. They've been due to outside contact. So I think that was really imperative in the beginning. And then as we go on, and I know we'll talk about this some more with communication, is we've kept communication open, ongoing, and as things have evolved, we've kept working very diligently to make sure that we have the right procedures and policies in place.
So Jack, it appears that you conveniently escaped the beginning of this crisis, but this is not your first rodeo, right? So I know when we were talking earlier that you had learned some lessons from 9/11 and the 2008 financial crisis, specifically about your associates. Perhaps you could elaborate on that.
So, yeah, I would say the biggest lesson we learned was in the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. Obviously, our business kind of fell dramatically off during the collapse at the end of 2008. So when we were setting our goals for 2009, we put in place one goal, one single goal for the whole company, and that was to keep everybody employed, all our key people, manufacturing associates, as many as possible. And a couple of reasons for that is because, well, it's part of our culture to look after one another and respect one another. And also because making wipes and mops for clean rooms is not exactly a skill people go to college to learn. So the knowledge base that's in our employees' heads is one of the most critical assets that we have. So that was a great decision on our part and has led to double-digit growth in every year since.
Wow, that's great. Well, let's maybe give Jim a chance. Jim, you co-founded Contec with Jack, and Avi, you serve as the president. Given the industries that Contec serves, the pandemic must have led to some significant increased demand, unlike the 2008 crisis. Tell us what happened.
Well,
Yeah, we.
I guess. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim. Either way.
No, I mean, when we first started the company, we were heavily involved in the electronics industry, and as time evolved, we became more into life sciences. And as this approached, we were heavily into the medical market. So it was for me, it was like all of a sudden you had this responsibility when nobody could get cleaning supplies and PPE equipment, and you heard all this stuff in the news, that it made you feel like you had a responsibility to respond and do everything you could to keep people working and all your customers supplied as well as you could.
One thing that I'll add to that, specifically around the demand that we saw, we literally in a 3-week period saw our open order book increase by about 300%, and that came out of no forecast, no plan, and we basically were inundated with orders from existing customers, orders from new customers that hadn't ordered a certain product before were coming to us asking us for those products. And at that same time, one of the main key ingredients used in a lot of our products is isopropyl alcohol, and as a raw material. And as most people are aware, isopropyl alcohol is also used in hand sanitizers. And during that period, that 3-week period, isopropyl alcohol saw its highest demand for pretty much it's ever seen, and had a limited supply for a number of reasons. One, the market for IPA is a byproduct of gas of making of refining oil basically, and so with the oil pricing being as low as it had been because the market had been flooded, there wasn't a lot of oil being refined because it's basically cheaper not to refine oil than to ship it. So there was a shortage of IPA on the market. One of the major producers of oil refiners actually had a fire at one of its facilities, and so that facility was down at the same time. So essentially, the demand for isopropyl alcohol was through the roof, limited supply, and we were trying to respond at the same time to this 300% increase in isopropyl alcohol products. It was really quite the perfect storm, and required us to do a lot of things, including looking at where we could support our existing customer base. So essentially, our primary focus became, yes, we know we have a lot of orders on the books. Yes, we know we have a lot of customers new customers asking for products. But as far as the isopropyl alcohol products, let's focus on those customers that have been existing customers, and let's ensure that we're continuing to provide them the products they need. So we kind of work through an allocation type process to ensure that our existing customers were continuing to get product. We also did some pretty neat things with looking at qualifying some new products where we needed for raw materials to ensure that we were able to continue supplying customers with products even though there were raw material shortages in the market.
Wow, that sounds like quite a challenge. So you were seeing demand increase from your existing customer base as well as new customers coming on board, and supply chain problems as well, which we'll get to here in a moment and have Raphael address. But did you end up offering some other, you alluded to new products and services as well. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that. What type of, in the light of all the challenges, to do new products at the same time, that just sounds like over the top. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I'll actually throw this back to Jack, because specifically, Jack, you may want to talk about the nonwovens that we qualified.
So, yeah, we had an unprecedented increase in demand for one of the disinfectants that we've had for many years, and we have contract manufactured. So with a 7-fold increase in demand, our contract manufacturer couldn't make it. So I reached out to Milliken, knowing that Milliken Chemical is a very quality-oriented company and a local partner here in Spartanburg. And within, I'd say, 3 to 4 weeks, Milliken had qualified their plant to make this product, a process that would normally last 6 to 9 months to do a qualification. So they were up and running about 2 weeks after that and helping us meet the demand for that disinfectant. And sort of along similar lines, we have a non-woven fabric that's used in a lot of disinfecting wipes that we convert into rolls, and we were running short on that. So we reached out to another company locally in Hendersonville, North Carolina, Norafin, and we qualified their fabric within basically a week, and they were delivering product to us within 2 weeks. So our R&D team and supply chain folks were doing some amazing things, because obviously with our critical customer base, it takes a while to set up a new vendor, and we were doing this on the fly while we were also trying to get as much product possible from our existing vendors. So some real heavy lifting was done by everybody on both our partner side and our side.
Wow, amazing. So Raphael, you direct operations. You were the guy on the ground through all of this. Tell us some of those challenges from your perspective.
Well, I started back in the middle of February, and shortly after I joined the company, the pandemic hit. So certainly trial by fire, I will say. As Avi mentioned earlier, IPA, isopropyl alcohol, was our biggest challenge in terms of the supply chain. And but shortly after that, we've seen a number of others components that we have had shortages, including plastic bags, bottle triggers, caps for bottles. I mean, you name it. And simply because the demand is such that nobody out there in the market throughout the supply chain could have envisioned this. So it was basically, as we encounter any of these challenges, we just work through alternate suppliers and change direction in terms of the work we're making, et cetera, et cetera. So it certainly has been an interesting ride so far.
So big challenge on the supply chain. What about actual operations? So things like schedules, layouts, things like that. I'm sure they had a big impact there as well.
Well, the biggest challenge and the biggest change had to be really with the protocols that we had to enact to continue in operations. As mentioned earlier, we make contamination control products for hospital medical device manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies. So we had to continue producing. So to do that to do it safely, we adopted a number of protocols, including sanitization of doorknobs and other surfaces of high traffic areas. We implemented the mandatory use of face masks for all Contec sites. And these face masks were actually designed and made on our manufacturing site here in Spartanburg. And we provided these to all of our Contec associates, and then eventually we also made them available to the immediate family for our associates. We also implemented associate screenings on all shifts to identify associates who may have been exposed to the virus. And we had this questionnaire that the purpose was to identify those who may have traveled to COVID-19 hotspots, those who had close contact with anybody who had been diagnosed with the virus, or those who had any symptoms at all. So all personnel that answered yes to any of these questions were denied entrance to the facility to ensure that we were not contaminating other associates. We restricted the outside visitors to an absolute minimum, and all visitors had to complete a COVID-19 questionnaire before entering the facility, and of course wear a face mask. Of course, we implemented social distancing throughout the sites, and that involved minimizing the occupancy on the break rooms and conference rooms to ensure that we had at least a 6 feet different spacing between associates. And then, of course, as we're doing right now, we changed meetings to virtual meetings using such tools as Microsoft Teams. And then finally, we asked support personnel to work remotely. So through a number of these protocols, we believe, successful in terms of minimizing exposure to our associates, and that is reflected in the fact that we have had very few positive cases, and we have found afterwards that they were exposed actually outside of the facility.
Wow, that's an outstanding story and outcome. I'm sure you're proud of that in particular. So Elaine, you have an interesting title, Chief HR Business Partner. That one caught my attention. So certainly people are driving all of this, as we've talked about already. Tell us about how those challenges affected you and things from your perspective.
Well, in terms of how they impacted me, and I'm going to speak in terms of the HR team, obviously there was a great need to spend a lot of time, on the ground with employees, reassuring them, when you're facing these types of situations, there was a great deal of uncertainty, procedures changed in the workplace, the daily routines changed, and it's hard for people to deal with change. And early on, I think employees at first, some were very concerned about what was happening. Others didn't think it was a big deal, that we were making more of it than we needed to. Of course, as time went on, I think the realization was that, yes, there was indeed a need to have all of the things that Rafael just mentioned put in place in terms of protocols. And, they missed the socialization that they used to have in the workplace. We had to spread people out, taking breaks together. We had to keep them distanced. So, the day-to-day routines that they were used to went away, but slowly I think employees, came to understand and accept that, when they saw what was happening in the market with a lot of unemployment, they were still working. We were doing everything we could to keep them safe. And I think, overall the morale where we are right now is very good. People are positive. One of the things we did do when we recognized that while we did deploy a number of people to work from home, we still had people that had to come into work every day. And that's a certain level of risk when you're working in an environment where there's a pandemic. So we did, on a regular basis, provide bonuses to these employees, which they were grateful for. We didn't have a lot of issues. I know, a lot of people were concerned about things like childcare and people having to be away from work. But surprisingly, even though we were prepared to address that by adopting a pandemic childcare leave policy, Really, no one has really requested to use that yet. So obviously they have things in place which allows them to continue to work. But if something were to come up going forward, we certainly have the ability to address those types of issues.
Wow, very comprehensive response. And it sounds like the employees have appreciated that, which is great. So Matt, although your primary role is Chief Marketing Officer, this pandemic, as I understand it, had to call on some of your other skills. And so
Sure.
Elaine's talking about social distancing and so forth. How did you handle things like communications, team building, those kind of issues, which is kind of down, as you were probably less focused on the marketplace with all these great orders coming in, you were more inwardly focused, I suspect.
Sure. Well, we developed strategies both internally and externally. I would say in summation, our COVID communication strategy was really driven by two guiding principles: visibility and transparency. And the latter, of course, is really just a synonym for honesty. And I would divide that into two distinct parts. One is internal communication and the other is external. Internally, the leadership team met immediately, as Avi had shared earlier, and set out a strategy to communicate with our own internal associates on a very consistent basis. Between middle of March and just this week, we have posted no fewer than 18 video blogs from different combinations of the leadership team that have been viewed more than 3,000 times by our associates internally. On the external side, we faced a different challenge. We have more than 50 sales associates spread out across the country and really spread out across the world, who suddenly weren't allowed into the very facilities that they were calling on to help sell our products. Now, selling products wasn't necessarily a challenge because we had more orders than we knew what to do with. But to continue that dialogue that we had established over many, many years without being able to see somebody face to face, it led us down an interesting path. With Steve Thompson's help, we immediately procured 50 licenses for GoToMeeting, which is a software that enables our sales associates to conduct webinars, not unlike what we're doing right here, right now. And in the 3 months since we deployed that software, we've conducted more than 350 customer webinars at more than 150 hours of total time shared. So that visibility that is so important to a business like ours, internally and externally, we feel pretty solid about what we've been able to accomplish these past 100 days.
Wow, great. Those are some impressive statistics. You mentioned Steve. Steve's your CFO. So Steve, technology was under your purvey. Tell us how you use technology in order to navigate through the issues of the COVID.
Okay, well, like a lot of companies, we weren't completely ready for employees to work from home, so we scrambled and worked against other people and gained the necessary assets and had them set up to work from home. Plus, we had to have them connected to our system, so we actually obtained two different methods to allow remote access for the employees. As I say, timing is everything. Just prior to the flu coming to the U.S. from China, we had made the decision to switch to Microsoft Teams. We had previously used Skype for Business, and with the decision that Skype for Business was going away, and there's some security issues with some other software, and a lot of our people we're dealing with were already using Teams. The decision was moved to Teams, although we hadn't made that move. With employees working from home, we need to continue to communicate with them in the world. We pushed Teams out to everyone, and everyone seemed to pick it up really rapidly, and soon we were holding virtual meetings with cameras on. This allowed communication and a sense of unity, although the participants were miles apart. Teams proved to be a great asset as we worked through this difficult time, and whether due to eating habits or ultra-casual dress, after the first week, many people turned their cameras off, but we continue to use the audio.
So what do you think is going to happen after we survive the immediate effects of COVID-19? Do you expect to continue to use these technologies? Where do you see things going from here?
Sure, and as Matt mentioned, we use GoToMeeting also. I think GoToMeeting and Teams will be used extensively going forward. As we become a more mobile workforce and have people working from their homes and from different locations, we have 3 plants here in Spartanburg. We have a facility in Ohio. We have facilities in China, France, and the UK. And we have, like Matt mentioned, we have people scattered throughout the world. we can talk to anybody at one time or the whole group as a team in teams. So I think going forward, it's going to be a major asset for us in our communication and working with the people around the world.
Sounds great. So Jack, you're the CEO. You set the tone for Contec. It's very clear from all of we've heard from your management team in terms of there's an obvious shared sense of common values that appear to have guided their decisions even when you weren't there, regarding both your associates and your customers. So is that something that you and your team discuss? Is that just they just get it, they understand it? Do you reinforce it by behavior? So how do you do it?
So first, I thought I'd show you the mask that was designed internally, because it was a really cool design, and everybody's wearing it throughout the plant. But the culture we have here at Contec has really been driven by the core values, and our core values represent the way Jim and I basically treated each other when we were working together, just he and I, and as we started bringing people on. And about 20 years ago, we committed them to paper. And the core values are respect for others, integrity, whatever it takes, tolerance for risk, work-life harmony, and enjoy the ride, which is probably really just the golden rule in a different form. Do unto others as you would want done unto you. So we live and breathe and talk about that culture all the time, because we believe it's the single biggest asset we have as a company for competing with bigger companies that we've always competed with. People work their buns off here, and part of it is because they enjoy working here. I am proud to come to work here every day. I'm proud of all the associates we have. I'm proud of the diversity that we have in our workplace. So the fact that the team that you're talking to today responded so well to this crisis just reflects that culture in action. And, a couple of shout outs. Without Matt on our team, the videos that we did were outside the comfort zone of a lot of us, and we probably wouldn't have done them. Elaine has done amazing work. While she's doing all these things with protocols for COVID, we're also trying to hire 60 to 80 new associates to meet the demand that we're seeing increasing. Raphael is brand new to the team, and like he said, 6 weeks on the job, and he's facing a pandemic and an influx of orders 4 and 5 times the amount. As Steve said, we're totally changed over the technology we're using, and all of a sudden there were people working from home. And some of the cool things were employees embracing the go-to meeting, and they would have virtual happy hours with their entire sales teams to kind of keep that camaraderie going, even though they weren't out and visiting customers. And Avi's leadership as the president of the company, when I was away, taking the ball and running with it, you couldn't ask for more. So we have a fabulous leadership team that has just responded. And Jim is always out on the floor joking with associates. He keeps the mood light in the workplace, does an amazing job of just being there for all of our production associates. So it's a great team we have here.
It's absolutely. And I might add that Jack is a Innovision Towns Individual Award recipient, certainly well deserved. So let me maybe open up my next question to the entire team. Looking back over the last 3 months, what was the most memorable? What was the most significant lesson that you learned? Who would like to address that one?
Well, I'll start by saying that there's a lot that wasn't memorable. But one of the most memorable things was how well our team came together. Our associates are 100% committed to this company. They're 100% committed to what we do, and just to see them take this seriously, to see them take the seriousness of wearing masks, the seriousness of we're going to maintain social distancing, and to do what they did to ensure that we were delivering to customers. Jack talked about our core values. Truly, whatever it takes became a mantra around the company. And we knew we weren't going to be able to get every single order out, but we were going to do the best we could and do the best we could with what we had. And seeing our team come together and take that seriously and commit to doing that was truly memorable. We said if we get through this, we'll get through anything after this, and I truly still believe that.
And I would say,
go ahead, Jack.
Michael, I would say one of the things we did was our sales reps were very frustrated because they couldn't really do anything. Many of them volunteered to drive to Spartanburg to help in production, which is not a good idea during a pandemic. So one of the ideas we came up with was for all of our sales reps to write letters to our hourly associates or production associates to let them know, first of all, thank you for coming to work during a very uneasy situation at the beginning of this crisis when nobody knew how fast the disease was spreading and how it might affect them, to let them know how our products are being used in the field by our customers, how important they are to the healthcare industry in general. So our sales reps embraced that challenge. I think there were probably many thousands of letters written specifically to people at their home address, which was facilitated by Elaine. And to me, that was great because I got a lot of positive feedback, both from the reps who got messages back from production associates and from production associates who were grateful that they'd been reached out to. So that was pretty cool.
That's very cool. I mean, if you look at the typical relationship between production and sales, it's usually not the most positive, and so that's incredible. That's a real turning of the whole situation around. Matt, I think you had a comment as well.
So you asked about lessons learned, and for me, I would say the biggest lesson learned is you don't know what you're capable of until you're forced to try. So Elaine, Jack, the leadership team decided quickly to send associates home for their own protection and safety. Then schools were closed. So a lot of folks overnight became homeschool teachers. Then the restaurants closed. People had to prepare meals in a way and on a consistent basis they didn't have to do before. And it's not as if the demands of the job changed very much. If anything, they became more strenuous during this time. So the way in which so many associates rose to that challenge and delivered day in and day out, while also picking up new skills because of the way the world had suddenly changed virtually overnight, it was really heartwarming and just incredible to see.
That is incredible. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'll just add to what Matt said. I think in the core values, when Jack mentioned whatever it takes, I mean, I can't count the number of times we saw that happen throughout this, and it continues to happen throughout this. People really care about this company, and they're doing things that, if you want to talk about what's in their job description, it doesn't matter. They've jumped in, they've given a helping hand wherever they needed to, and they continue to do it. And I'm very thankful that, we're surrounded by such a great group of people here, both, at the management level and even the workers out on the floor that do our production every day. They're awesome.
Well, that comes across just in the dialogue we're having here. Jack, you put together an incredible team of people. So looking forward, what can we expect? What does the future look like for?
Well, I have to say that we think the new normal, as it were, after COVID is going to involve a lot more critical cleaning. So we think there's a very bright future for our company. As I said, we're hiring a lot of people right now and to meet some of the needs that are developing, but we're also developing new products to help meet that need. And we expect the company to continue to expand and grow. We've actually grown sales 32 of the past 33 years. So that's something that's kind of in our DNA. But these guys that are making up our executive team, I can't say enough about them or the teams that they have that they work with. As Elaine said, everybody's gone above and beyond to make it work. We pumped out basically 20% more product than we've ever made consistently for the last 3 months, which is unbelievable. And we're going to just keep, we've got, right now we have about $10 to $12 million worth of capital equipment on order, which will mostly be coming into our Wingo Park facility to accommodate some of the growth we see in demand. And we will continue investing as we always have to grow this company and make it a great place to work.
Well, Jack, thank you and your team for describing how Contec has reacted to this pandemic. It's evident that you have used a flexible approach guided by a shared understanding of, critical importance of employees and the commitment to the customers who rely so heavily on them. So before we respond to questions, I'd like to remind you to visit innovisionawards.org to nominate companies like Contec that you believe should be recognized for innovation, and continue to watch for more webinars on these topics in the next few months.
Thank you for joining our discussion. I'm Daniel Crow. I'm Contec's Manager in Multimedia, and we're going to move into the question and answer portion of today's presentation. Depending on which platform you're watching, we're broadcasting this both on LinkedIn Live and on GoToWebinar. You can either use the chat feature in LinkedIn or use the questions panel in GoToWebinar to submit your questions for answering. There's also another way that we'd love for you to engage with today's webinar. Even if you don't have a question, we'd ask that you just post in the chat one of your takeaways from this discussion. That's the networking effect of LinkedIn, if you will, that we can all build each other up in business. So our first question, I'm going to ask Avi. Avi, what's next? What's the outlook for the back half of the year, given that this pandemic doesn't appear to be slowing down?
Daniel, thank you. As we kind of talked a little bit about, we heard from Jack as well. We expect that we'll continue to be pretty busy for the back half of the year. And as you indicated, that the pandemic doesn't appear to be slowing down, we'll continue using and doing a lot of the procedures we've put, mask wearing, social distancing, and continuing to monitor the movements of our employees and ensuring that we keep them safe. We're continuing to do working from home for those that are not facility dependent. And the next big thing that we see is as companies begin announcing vaccines and manufacturing vaccines, we see that as an additional opportunity for us, where we're going to be busy in the back half of the year working on product for companies that are manufacturing vaccines. So we don't see any slowing down with our business or the pandemic, unfortunately, but we are hopeful and that people are working on vaccines, and that there will be something here shortly as a solution to the pandemic.
Thank you, Avi. The next question that has come in, I'm going to give to Elaine. Elaine, how are you bracing for back to school?
How is Contec bracing for back to school? Is that the question?
Yes.
So recently, in fact, yesterday, Jack and I participated in a call with the group that was hosted by the United Way of the Piedmont. Obviously, there are a lot of questions right now in terms of what kind of school schedules there are going to be, specifically, looking in the Spartanburg area, since that's where the largest number of our employees are. But we realize employees are impacted all across the country. What we did to prepare for that, just yesterday, I took a look at all the different schedules that are being proposed in Spartanburg County. There are 7 distinct school districts, and then the other counties in our outlying area, Greenville, Union, and Cherokee, have 1 district. And there's still a couple of them are still working on formulating their back to school policies. But what we put in place to help parents is, as they come to us, if there's a need that they need to be out, depending on whether they're facility dependent, meaning they have to be here to conduct their work because the equipment's here, or whether they're able to telecommute, we're prepared to work with parents on helping them with their schedules to the greatest extent we can. And if for some reason we're not able to work out a situation, we put in place an emergency child care pandemic leave policy that will allow employees who are eligible to apply for up to 12 weeks of paid time away from work so that they can help with their child's schooling if they have to be at home with them or if they've lost child care because of the pandemic. And every situation is different. I realize, parents have different scenarios in terms of family members and, the children of different ages that live within their household. So to say that everything's going to be a one size fits all is difficult. So we will look at each situation independently and evaluate and work with that employee to determine, what we can do to help them through this process. There's so much uncertainty right now in terms of what the long-term return to school is going to look like. But in the short term, there's a hybrid schedule that most schools have adopted where children will be in school a couple of days a week. They'll be working remotely for the remainder of the week unless parents opt for them to do an entire virtual school from home, which some can do. So we just have to wait and see what's going on. But that's the best we can do right now is just to work with employees independently.
Okay, thank you. Jack, I think this question would be great for you. This comes from John over on LinkedIn. Will Contec be vetting any third-party business partners to assist with their future workforce development needs?
So I'd say the answer to that is we've always been open to working with third parties. Elaine and her team have done a great job. As we have grown, we've developed a lot of our own internal capabilities for workforce development with training programs. We have a couple of training managers who are helping hourly associates and also helping our people in the field with sales programs, things like that. But we're always looking for new ideas to do things better and smarter. So I'd say we're open to anything that can help us improve as a company.
Okay, thank you. This question comes from Mike on GoToWebinar. Raphael, I'm going to send this one to you. The question is, in addition to mask and distancing, did you incorporate face shields or dividers between folks that work in closer proximity?
Yes, thanks. So with regards to the dividers, we did. We did it selectively, specifically on cubicles. If the cubicle wall was not high enough, that we implemented dividers there were needed. But we looked at a number of other alternatives in terms of protecting associates. The social distancing during meetings. Whenever we had to have those meetings in person, we made certain that there was appropriate distance in between associates. So, yeah, that was pretty much our approach.
Okay, thank you, Raphael. Jack, this may be another one for you. This comes from Karen on LinkedIn. The question is, what about your network of suppliers? As the pandemic worsens around the world, do you have any concerns about critical suppliers, their capacity, and their reliability?
Yes, clearly we have some suppliers that are both here in the U.S. and offshore, some in Europe and some in Asia. We have a plant in China that is supplying a lot of material to us now as a backup to our current production here in the U.S. so that we can supplement that demand. And we're rapidly working, as we talked about in the video, to qualify other suppliers of raw materials. Fabrics are especially tight right now, any fabrics used in disinfection. So our R&D team has really turned a lot from developing new products to developing the supply chain that will allow us to continue to be a reliable supplier to our customers. So yes, that's a very big deal right now because the pandemic does not really seem to be slowing down. And the more suppliers we can get domestically, the better off we are. We are aware of some of our suppliers who are adding capacity right now like we are. So it's just something we will handle as we move along, but we are working our buns off to get there.
Okay, we have time for just a couple more questions. If you have any more questions, please use the chat in LinkedIn or the questions panel and GoToWebinar to send those questions. This next question is for our friends at Innovision. Michael, The question is, how can I learn more about Innovision and its mission?
Great question. And actually, I'd like to toss this one over to Amy, who's our fearless leader. And she can certainly answer that, and with a lot of passion.
Thank you, Michael. Innovision was started more than 20 years ago, and really the initial focus was just to highlight, promote innovation within the upstate. We've now grown to cover the whole state of South Carolina, and this highlight and promoting and educating takes place in two different formats. One is this series of forums where we gather those who are very highly skilled and demonstrate innovation to share their stories with the rest of the community. The other facet of Innovision is an awards program, and our awards are given in 8 different categories of innovation. You can go to our website, innovisionawards.org, and learn more. And interestingly enough, our call for entries this year ends on Friday. And we have, at this point, upwards 25 to 30 entries and are looking for more as well. So if you have a story to share, an innovation, be it in product or process, please consider filling out an application. It's a great community. Contec has won numerous times, and as we said earlier, Jack is a Dr. Charles Towns Individual Achievement Award honoree. So it's a great community to be a part of, with lots of opportunities for networking, even in this virtual environment we find ourselves in.
Thank you, Amy. That was better than I could have said it. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Contec team. It was fun to work with all of you, and it was a great story to tell. So on behalf of Innovision, thank you for kicking off our forum series with this outstanding story. And perhaps we'll let Jack maybe provide us with some final thoughts.
Sure thing, Michael. First of all, I want to thank you and Amy for asking us to do this. We're always pleased and proud to talk about what our company has accomplished and what our team has accomplished. And I guess the last thought that I would put out there is just a thank you to all of Contec's associates that aren't on this call. They represent what is best about an American workforce that can rise to the occasion when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And our hourly associates, our supply chain, our R&D teams, marketing, everybody has risen to the occasion. We're continuing to produce dramatically more product than we ever have in the past. And people are smiling coming into work, and they know how important our products are to the industries we service. And I'm just proud that we represent them on this call and want to thank them for everything they're doing. So we appreciate you guys thinking of us when you put this forum together.
Well, thank you everybody for participating. Thank you to everyone at Innovision and our panel from Contec. And also thank you for tuning in and spending a little bit of your day with us, you know, whether you're listening to this in a conference room with some others, or you're watching this at home or in your office. We hope that you'll stay safe. If you aren't familiar with Contec and this is your first introduction to us, we'd invite you to visit our website, www.contecinc.com, to learn more. Thank you again for joining us. Hope you'll have a great day.